Live from the Emerald City, this is Derailed Trains of Thought. Welcome to episode 110 of Derailed Trains of Thoughts, your premier podcast on storytelling for the creator and the consumer. My name is Timothy Deal.
My name is Nick Hayden.
And we are coming to you from what looks like it used to be a pretty place.
Yeah, there's no emeralds at all.
No, I thought it was supposed to be all green here.
I know, and like they got attacked or something.
Everything's in ruins. There's stone statues everywhere. I think there's graffiti on that wall over there.
I mean, dare I say we're not in Kansas anymore?
I think that's fair.
I'm
not even sure where else we would be here.
No.
We haven't been in Kansas lately. I know Spider-Man
was.
At least in our last episode.
What was that graffiti say there?
Beware the wheelers.
Okay.
I don't think I want to have anything to do with whatever those guys are.
Let's find some crevice somewhere, and
yeah.
I don't feel safe being out in the open here.
I think it's a wise thing. Here, I've got this key. I think this closet over here will be a nice safe place to record from.
This is a city of a different color.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, howdy, Nick. How's your summer going?
Going well. Well, I was on vacation since last we recorded, which was nice and relaxing.
You were kind of near my old stomping grounds in Virginia.
Exactly.
When I heard you were at the Chesapeake Bay, I was like, oh, I felt suddenly kind of, not homesick, I guess, because I still live in where I grew up. But yeah, another time nostalgic.
Yep. It was good. I really enjoyed it. It was a nice getaway.
Cool.
So what you been doing, Tim?
Oh, wedding prep, that kind of stuff.
Oh, exciting.
Planning, getting save the date cards out, all that good brouhaha.
Maybe wheelers can help?
I'm not so sure about that.
I don't know. There's magical things here. We'll see.
No, I mean, I'm kind of peeping through this keyhole here. Those guys have got some weird fashion sense.
Oh, I see. Yeah, let's not.
Let's not bother them as much as we can help it. But speaking of weird, I think it's time for Story School. So for today's topic for Story School, I thought it'd be fun to talk about the strangeness that can be found in certain stories.
What? Stories can be weird?
Stories can be quite weird. And my title for this unofficially is The Weird, the Bizarre, and the Ugly. I also kind of consider those as sort of categories in a sense.
Okay, so talk through me about weird then. Let's start with our first one.
All right. Well, I guess you should also say what I think is interesting about having strangeness and weirdness in stories is that there's kind of this scale of attractiveness to stories that with weird stuff that we find really interesting, but then there's also stories that have this kind of strange stuff that kind of repels us. Like, I don't want to have anything to do with that.
Yeah, it's too much.
It's too much. Yeah. So for my first category, weird, which is a little bit nebulous. I realize weird is probably not the best word for this, because you could call any of these categories weird.
Weird.
Like, oh, my brother's so weird too. Man, that was weird.
Exactly.
So maybe this first one.
So is Ragnarok weird?
I would say Ragnarok is weird in, yes, this first category, which I would find the most on the top of the scale on the attractiveness. This is almost, maybe a better word for this would be oddball.
Oddball, okay.
So this is the endearing kind of weird. It's like when you have a friend or a sibling that's just kind of eccentric, kind of out there. You know, Gonzo the Great is considered a weirdo because he enjoys tap dancing and tapioca and thumbtacks.
Yeah, exactly.
Things like
tacky things.
Yeah, yeah. Well done. Or some of his acts involve like eating a tire to the tune of Flight of the Bumblebee. You know, these are actual things Gonzo has done.
Yeah, and it's weird, but it's good.
Yeah, we love him for it. I would also include like off-kilter humor, things that are kind of zany, like Homestar Runner, like we've talked about, is random, but sometimes it's also kind of weird in that lovable way.
Yeah, it's like it has a consistency to its weirdness so that it becomes familiar.
Right.
It's just totally like, it just kind of draws you a little over the line, just a bit over the line.
Whether it's a whale-shaped drive-up window thing.
Save your leg, please, Thursday.
Or the odd comic book violence of Teen Girl Squad.
Arrowed.
Far forward.
Oh, Teen Girl Squad.
And add all these things on top of each other. Sometimes, like, I remember when one of Strong Bad making fun of someone's Halloween costumes as Krat Stuntman, and he's like, "Let me get this straight. How you'd explain this? Like, you're being the made up voice of this made up cartoon show from this cartoon."
Exactly.
Made up voice actor. So that's the oddball category, and pretty straightforward. I mean, oddball, but I'm sure you can think of many examples.
And they tend to be relatively safe in the sense, I guess, of almost like they're not transgressive in any way.
No.
They're just like a little farther than people might, but they're like, oh, that's funny, or that's weird, or I thought about that but never did it.
Yeah, cartoons are really thrive in this era. You know, whether it's Looney Tunes or Phineas and Ferb. We were just talking about some of the great episodes about Meep.
Meep is amazing.
The alien that lives on a planet that thrives on cuteness. And there was one of those great episodes where like they were seeking cute. What is it called? Some cute formula that, like, if someone injustice, they become so cute that everyone will bow down to them.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's just one of those, like, you build on this ridiculous idea and it becomes funny.
So I think weird also happens when you have, especially in like speculative fiction shows or books, where it starts kind of a normal trope, so they just kind of grow over time and get. Like, I'm thinking in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., sometimes they'll say a sentence of like, I never thought I would say something like, it's like, it makes no sense if you've not watched 7 seasons of this thing. And so it's weird to an outsider, but it's not weird to someone who's acclimated.
Yes, indeed. And that's an interesting point that I want to bring in that will kind of become about this next category.
Okay.
And I'll circle back around to that. So next category here is the bizarre. Now, this is the kind of weird that can be fascinating or it can be scary.
Okay.
This is like your 80s fantasy movies.
All 80s fantasy movies.
Most 80s, yeah. So you and I just recently watched, because we found this was on Netflix, something we had long meant to see.
Disney Plus, actually.
Disney Plus. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said Netflix. On Disney Plus. Something that was based off a book that had some basis in American history. Return to Oz.
Return to Oz, which has always been, like, we had both had images of it from having never seen it.
Yes.
Just from things we'd seen in previous, like, that looks weird.
Incidentally, side note, those of you who might have thought I was talking about something else that was recently on Disney Plus, no. I mean, I've seen that, and I've seen Hamilton, and I think it's great, but Nick hasn't yet.
I have not yet.
But no, Return to Oz is something that we'd been meaning to see, because, yeah, you had seen a trailer for it. I had seen, like, a picture storybook I'd found in the library and being like, what is this?
I remember reading as a kid one of the Oz books. I don't remember. I think it's some sort of Underground of Oz, and maybe I had to... The Scarecrow fell down a hole and became king of this underground. Anyways, but I remember thinking it was weird, even the book, as at a whatever age I was reading at lower school. And this lived up to that.
And if you've ever seen it, it's nominally a sequel to The Wizard of Oz, the famous movie.
It's more a sequel to the book.
Yeah, it's more a sequel to the book, but they do touch on things that were only in the movie, like the Ruby Slippers.
Yeah.
But it's not a musical, and it's not
it's not really kid friendly.
No, if you thought the flying monkeys in The Wizard of Oz were too scary, you're in for a bad time if you try to watch this one. It goes hardcore into the weird and dark.
I mean, it's more like Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah,
some of it's
we got heavy Tim Burton feels to it, even though it was made before Tim Burton's time, 1985.
Yeah,
but not just Return to Oz. Yeah. 80s fantasy movies in general. Labyrinth,
Dark Crystal,
Never-Ending Story has this, like, very, especially if you have vague memories of it and haven't seen it for a long time, then come back. It's almost becomes like this, like, for me, some of these have been almost like a haunting thing. I think I remember talking about that back very infamously about Never-Ending Story earlier on in this podcast. Sometimes it like gets under your skin, but in this way that, like, but what was that weird thing I saw as a kid?
And I think in some ways that's the strength of both weird and bizarre things, is that they shake up what we expect. Like they just tune some element of the storytelling up a couple notches more than we're used to. And sometimes it's very effective, and they, for good or ill, they tend to last in your head.
It really is. If it's gotten to this level of strangeness, bizarreness, you really do get the sense of visiting another world when you're in it. So in that sense, it's an escapism, but it's also it brings up this curiosity, and you trying to figure out, what is this world? What are the rules here? Why did the creators make these bizarre decisions in making this place?
I mean, that's how I feel about whenever I think about Brazil, the movie by Terry Gilliam. Really good movie, but very, very strange and very visually interesting.
And the trick with these things is that different people will have different levels of comfortableness with this, different tolerances.
There are commercials that are bizarre sometimes, like in this dangerous way. Have you ever watched Little Baby's Ice Cream?
Yes, I remember that one.
So we show this to the youth sometime. It's our kind of a initiation thing.
Okay.
And some of them are like, oh, that was great. And a lot of them, they'll come back and be like, what did we just see? Like, they're like, I can't get that out of my head now. Sort of weird.
You have to look it up on YouTube, listeners, if you've never seen it.
Little Baby's Ice Cream.
We would caution you not to show it to small children.
Yes.
I might traumatize some, but
Play at night. Don't do it.
but it is an experience.
It is. And that's the thing. The movies that can push that art and experience, sometimes not good experiences. And that's the danger.
Right. There's a whole category on the internet called nightmare fuel. That's when you see it at maybe too young an age and you're like, nope, never want to have anything to do with that again. And honestly, there's some movies like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory.
Yes, I will agree with that.
I saw that at, 6 years old. And the funny thing is, I don't really remember being scared at the time, at least not terrified like some other things I may have seen. Like, I remember trailers for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids used to give me nightmares.
Oh, really?
Like, I remember specifically there's a shot of like the kids and like Cheerios.
Yep.
And I think there's a shot of like him going down the throat. Oh, terrifying.
Really? Oh, see, that one didn't affect me, but
Willy Wonka.
Willy Wonka.
I remember I don't remember being terrified while watching it, but afterwards processing it, I was like, that was messed up.
I think the first time, and again, it was kind of my intro into a lot of anime / Miyazaki. One of the first ones I saw was like Prince Mononoke, and then Spirited Away. Spirited Away is No Face is something else.
No.
I mean, a lot of that movie is, but especially No Face for me.
Yeah. No, I remember Spirited Away being like completely tripped out toward the end of that. I think I had seen, this will be funny. I think I saw some of Prince Mononoke, but I actually wound up falling asleep.
Okay.
Because it had some very quiet, like peaceful moments kind of in the middle, and it was late enough at night. But Spirited Away was, what is this?
And I love that movie now, but like first time, and I loved it even after, but it was just like, there were things that just didn't go away right away.
Yeah. And I think I enjoyed Spirited Away because it was freshman year of college. It was a very interesting time in terms of like, it was very much this first, you're outside of your parents' house. I am not the kind of, I'm going to go do dumb things like drinking or drugs, but like, man, there's a lot of interesting movies out there.
Yep. It seems like in some ways, quote unquote, kids movies get this bizarre more often because for some reason they feel like they have like bizarre for adults tends to be like more horror stuff. Like, let's freak them out.
Right.
But like, there's a lot more you can do with bizarre than that.
Yeah.
And kids tend, especially cartoons, but not just cartoons, like the 80s fantasies, tend to want to, like, oh, we can be more fanciful. And fanciful sometimes means unmoored from reality.
Yeah.
In a unique way. Like, you can stretch things differently.
Yeah. Sometimes it can come across as whimsical, but sometimes it like, you just take whimsical a little direction and it veers into insanity.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen... actually, I've never seen this movie either. I've just seen clips from it. There's this Raggedy Ann and Andy movie.
Yeah. Oh, you know what? I have memories suddenly of seeing something like that.
It was animated by, I can't think of his name now. He's the guy who did, remember I showed you some of The Thief and the Cobbler?
Yes.
And Roger Rabbit.
Oh man, Roger Rabbit's one that got me as a kid.
I can see that. That was one I didn't see till I was a freshman. And I was like, yeah, this would have freaked me out as a kid, for sure.
The end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Christopher Lloyd character.
Yeah.
Another movie I have really no interest in seeing again, the Disney version of Alice in Wonderland.
Oh, see, I like that now. It's funny because I know a lot of people say about Alice in any form. Or let me say that differently. Alice's that have not been tamed by modern reinterpretations.
Yes.
Because like there's this old, it was like a PBS with a Jabberwocky and it was a cool dragon thing. But it still sticks in my head. I remember nothing else about it except that thing.
I don't think I ever saw it because, like, I probably had already seen the Disney one of like, nope, I don't have anything to do with that.
But when I showed my kids Alice in Wonderland, like, I loved it. Natasha's like, no. She, like, still doesn't like it. But my daughter Serendity's like, this is great. And so it's interesting how different people like Natasha's still too unmoored from reality. You know, it just doesn't work.
It goes too far.
It goes too far. For me, it's like, this is so creative and, you know, and I don't know, like, and I think people, like you said, have different tolerances, different amounts of interest in wanting to explore those things.
Yes, absolutely. Like my dad, for instance, very little tolerance for that.
Yeah.
I'm amazed we actually got to watch through all Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
Because, I mean, he has a history of getting nightmares about things anyway. So, like, he just can't take... And he loves action movies, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like, go too far into the fantasy or the surreal, and he's out.
See, I like surreal to a certain extent. I like magical realism. Playing with those kind of fantastical boundaries makes sense to me to a certain extent. Like, 80s fantasies are cool to me.
Yeah.
You know, and some people are like, what is this?
Well, and I think it is one of those things that I think your tolerances for it can actually increase as time goes by. Like, the more you've watched Spirited Away or Miyazaki, you start understanding the rules, or if not the rules, the way his mind works and the way this world works.
And I think that's important because why it's so bizarre is because it seems unmoored from reality. But once you understand where it's moored into reality, it doesn't bother you as much. It's when things are like, sometimes there's bizarre, like, I'll just throw Evangelion back in here.
Sure.
But there's a bizarre that you can't make work out logically in your head sometimes. Like things, you can't get the pieces to fit.
Yeah.
And then it just bothers you. It's just unsettling. But if you can make the pieces fit, you can say, oh, this is this. You know, no face represents whatever.
Right. And so and once you've hit that threshold of like, you understand the world, then I think sometimes a story drifts back from the bizarre into the oddball.
Yes.
So like, you know, the first time you may have seen Nightmare Before Christmas, you may have been... Or I remember first time seeing trailers like, that is weird looking. But then later on, like when I was a teens librarian, the sort of teens that come to library for programs were all about Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
So it was like, okay, sure, we'll watch it for Halloween. And I could understand, I could appreciate it for what it was. It was kind of this quirky, goth, cool, kind of heartfelt story. It went from just being, man, that's weird, to like, oh, okay, I kind of see it's my eccentric goth friend of a story.
And I wonder, I think some of the difference between like the bad bizarre to the good bizarre / weird is also being able to be tonally consistent. Like oddball is like the whole movie feels consistently, like Ragnarok's consistently something. Oh, some people will disagree, say it went too far at this joke or whatever.
Sure.
But versus like it's inconsistently
You mean
weird.
Thor Ragnarok? I suppose we should clarify that.
Yeah, Thor Ragnarok.
Yeah.
As opposed to movies that are like inconsistently weird. Like they'll be kind of normal and then turn weird and then come back.
Yeah.
And like then it becomes maybe even moves into ugly at that point. But you got lots of these. I've been watching some La Mystery Theater again. And like some of these movies, they're just weird in a way that doesn't make any sense at all. Versus it's like what happens with Star Wars. We all love everyone loves Star Wars, not everyone, but most people, like the originals. But when you look at it from the outside, it's like robots and this breathing guy and this prince with it. I mean, it's weird.
Well, you know, I'm glad you brought that up because actually I've been showing Janelle Star Wars because she knew some about Star Wars, but she'd never been a big fan.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, her best friend was kind of in the same boat. Her best friend had got married recently, and her husband was going through Star Wars with her. So it's
good husbands.
Yeah, exactly. Educate your loved ones on Star Wars. It's public service. But one thing that Janelle had told her friend Maria, she had mentioned that I had said that George Lucas kind of thinks of himself as avant-garde. And that kind of clicked with her. She's like, oh, that makes so much sense because I was having a really hard time understanding why you would have all these weird alien races. And like, she was really struggling to understand kind of the rules of the world, essentially. And which is fascinating for, you know, a grown adult to not understand the rules of Star Wars. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, that makes sense. You needed some sort of like entry point to understand how all this fits.
I suppose it's sort of like cultures. In the sense that, like, you go to a foreign country sometime, you're like, why are they acting so weird? Why do they do this? Why do they do that? Why do they? And it makes sense once you grok the culture.
You're gonna have to explain. I know you've defined.
I know
grok. It's like the third time.
I just like using the word grok to be clever, I guess. But No, it's like to fully understand, like to
Right.
get so well that you could like dream in, like if you grok language, you could dream the language.
Gotcha.
But you still like fully immerse yourself in the. So suddenly, like what was weird, suddenly you have context for why it works and what it does, and again, it might still be bad,
Right.
but at least there's understanding. Because the bizarre that's bad is when it separates. It's like like Francis Schaeffer has this. I don't know why I just bring Francis Schaeffer.
Nice.
Has
Go
this,
for it.
talking about that modern man has a two level of thinking that like there's the rational and then like they'll make these irrational jumps to believe certain things.
Right.
And I think weird stuff sometimes it seems irrational to a person, and we don't like something that's irrational that we perceive irrational. So either we have to just accept it without knowing why, and it just makes us uncomfortable, or we fit it into categories that we understand.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Yeah, this bizarre level I was kind of counting as neutral ground in my scale, because it can be attractive. For some people, it's unattractive.
Yeah.
If it's done poorly, I think that's where it becomes completely inscrutable.
Yeah.
That's more on the negative side of things. And sometimes that's just even a matter of like, you feel like there's a deeper meaning there, but you have no idea what it is.
Yes. I've had that in certain movies where you can, like, it just, I think you were trying to say something, but I don't get it, and it just
like you were just
frustrating.
You pointed me to animated shorts
Yes.
recently that I never heard of. Apparently, Walt Disney and Salvador Dali had worked together on this animated cartoon,
like what, 6 minutes or something like that?
something like that. I don't know how far they got based on. Apparently, the funding ran out, according to Disney Plus. This is where I'm getting this information.
And they finished it recently.
They finished it back in 2003, 2006, a few years ago. But it was Walt's nephew, Roy, who finally had it finished. And I was like, oh, that sounds intriguing. I took a look. I have no idea what that thing is about.
I have no idea. Like, you get some ideas of love or beauty or something, but it just, I watched it and Tasha's like, why did we watch this? Because I could kind of appreciate the art of it, but even then it's like, I don't have enough I think that's the other thing when it's, like, I think some people find Fantasia the same way.
Fantasia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The story ones they don't have problems with, like Sorcerer's Apprentice or like Rhapsody in Blue. But the more abstract it gets, the weirder it gets.
Yeah, interestingly enough, even Fantasia 2000 starts off with the more abstract thing, but I remember that abstract opening had more of a story in it than the abstract opening of Fantasia did. And I think one of the things like why I think some people, not everyone, there's going to be some purists who say no, the first original Fantasia is the best.
Yeah.
But Dan Povenmire, one of the creators of Phineas and Ferb, has said he likes Fantasia 2000 more, and I think it is partly because each of the segments in that one has a much stronger narrative structure.
I think when it's unmoored from narrative but feels like it has meaning, it's super frustrating.
Yeah.
Like there's parts of like the end of 2001. I'm sure there's a meaning there, but for a lot of people are just like, what? First time you watch it, like, it's very unfulfilling.
And I still have not seen 2001 for that very reason. I've heard enough about it from like both sides of like, yeah, this is probably would really intrigue super artsy people, and I should probably watch it at some point just to have a better cinematic knowledge, but I haven't felt in a rush to do it.
I think the ending would make more sense now than it did the first time, having more experience and stuff, but... Yeah.
So yeah, the inscrutable can be on the low end of the attractiveness / repelling scale of strangeness. So getting down to the very last one, ugly, and this may be again even more of a personal thing. Did you have anything else you wanted to add in there?
Just for inscrutable, I think, and again, this is my blind spot, but H.P. Lovecraft, I think that's the whole horror is the sense that there's the inscrutable, these unknowable gods doing things that you can't stop. That is just. Is
true.
Beyond your power to understand, and that's bizarre to people, but also horrifying, and that's good sometimes. And
yeah, I think we've talked before. I don't have a huge penchant for horror in the first place.
Yeah,
but that's probably one reason why I've never been particularly interested in that, because like inscrutable gods just aren't that interesting.
Yeah,
when you know and believe in
a inscrutable,
in a knowable God that has revealed himself to us.
Revealed God, yes.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So anyway, back to the last category I have, and on the bottom end of the repelling section, I'm calling ugly. Again, there may be difference of opinion here, but for me, ugly is stuff that is unattractive, sometimes purposefully so. I've said before that I'm very picky about cartoon animation styles.
Yeah.
Even sometimes kids stuff. If it's drawn in a way that I think is just really ugly and unattractive, I don't really have much interest. Like it may have really funny gags, it may have some funny story elements to it, but there's very few exceptions. I remember like when I was in high school, there was a Saturday morning cartoon called Science Court. It was just humorous enough. It was on ABC, and it was just humorous enough, even though it had like wiggly lines and poorly drawn, like mostly just talking mouths, and there was very little other movement.
Yeah.
It was just entertaining enough, and it was semi-educational that it was okay. But there's certain other things, whether it's made for adults or made for kids, and I think for me, part of that is it's not just the fact that I like things to look nice, but also I feel like because animation is such a intimate art form, like the hand-drawn things, someone's purposely drawing the lines, you're creating everything that you see on screen. If you are making it a certain form of unattractive, to me, it's reflective about something in your worldview. I think it actually hints at deeper things than just regular live action film, TV can do, because it's like, and again, there may be different tolerances for this. I mean, like I know our friend Greg, he tried to get me in Adventure Time, and I think Adventure Time has its heart in the right place. It seems like it has great storytelling. It's a weird art style, though. I could never quite get into it, and I don't know. Again, I'm sure not to say that it's bad or unwholesome or anything like that. In that case, it didn't seem to me from the little I saw of it, but it was just there was a certain weirdness to it that didn't really interest me.
Yeah. Purposeful ugliness is a strange choice in any case, especially in an art style where you have control over making things look good.
Yeah. And again, there may be, I put a lot of caveats to this one because there's probably differences of opinion here. I wouldn't be surprised. Like I remember when I worked at Fort Wayne Library, our children's librarian admitted she was a weird children's librarian that didn't really care that much for Dr. Seuss.
I could understand it. They're weird drawings. Yeah,
and I don't know if that's because of that or she just didn't grow up with it. But yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities for why something looks interesting to one person and not so much to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also like what you said, I guess you could also say maybe it's not purposely unattractive. Maybe it's just bad filmmaking.
No, that could be.
Like in the case of like sometimes those MST3K movies are fascinating because they turned out so weird.
Yeah.
But then other times you're like, there's something unpleasant about this.
And like bad weird tends to be because something's out of sort that really shouldn't be out of sort, or like, or they try to make something clever and they just didn't have the ability to do it, or the money or the acting or the writers or all the above.
Right. And I think this happens. I think this is especially prone to happen with bad horror sometimes. Not only is there the sense of like they pulled off this bizarreness poorly, but also there's this dark, cynical something underneath it all. Like I remember that being kind of the like Manos the Hands of Fate is hilarious at first because it's so boring, but everyone gets mad at the ending because it gives you kind of this weird squicky feeling to what happened to the characters in it.
And I guess there's just a certain amount of like, I think things can become weird when you just don't know how to put it together. Like in movies where your editing's just, you have no sense of the narrative connectives. Like we said, and I never thought of this before we had this conversation. It does seem like the ability of you to tell a powerful narrative can lessen or make the weird work. Whether the narrative can hold and ground it or not. And I think that's where like Alice in Wonderland gets weird for people because the narrative is very piecemeal versus something like Spirited Away where there's a strong sense of connectivity to the various pieces.
Right. And even in Spirited Away, even if you don't understand certain pieces like No Face, you can at least understand the plight of Chihiro, the main character, trying to rescue her parents, get out of this weird place. There's at least a very thorough plot line to follow.
Yeah.
Even if it's set in a world that is way outside the norm.
So I suppose weirdness is rooted both in your narrative structure and then also just in like almost the cultural choices. Like we watched, what was the thing we watched with our friend Nathan? It was half anime and half models and
I can't remember what it was called.
And that weirdness is almost more just cultural choices versus you mixing anime and models versus
anime. It was an anime / Power Rangers sort of thing. Yeah.
And so the weirdness there is not so much that it didn't have a story. You could understand the story just fine. I mean, it wasn't super compelling, but you could understand it just fine. But the fact that they threw these pieces that don't normally go together and over the top, and I mean, people find anime weird for that reason because they're not used to the language of the over the topness of anime.
I was just thinking of there was a student film I remember loving when I was at Regents that's included these guys running around in these like brightly colored jumpsuits.
Okay.
And what was great about it, I mean, it was definitely in the oddball category here, where it was just guys being silly. But I remember what was great is it was entered in like our student film festival, and so many of the other student films had been trying to be these really deep, artful things, and started getting depressing after watching a bunch of these. And then this goofy thing comes on with guys running around the parks doing flips and fighting off a sock puppet villain.
I think, do you show me that one? It sounds familiar now.
I did show it to you a while ago. And it was such a breath of fresh air and just like this burst of new kind of creativity reminded us, it's good to be artful, but it's also good to like be silly sometimes.
I suppose that's the benefit of weird, is that it adds a certain amount of flavor sometimes to what might be whatever the norm is at the time. Like, oh, wow, this is a way to do stories. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it can break new ground sometimes. I mean, I guess it's not just about creating a weird story environment. Sometimes, the very structure of it can really throw someone off, and until you're like, wow, what was that? Let me watch that again, understand what's going on, what's the filmmakers doing here.
Weird could be, weird time stuff like in Dunkirk. It could be weird visual things like in Speed Racer. You can do things that aren't full-scale bizarre that are just like, I've not seen that before. And that's, we like things that we haven't seen before, but we also like the familiar, and that's the tension.
Exactly. And we've been focusing, we'll wrap this up here in a minute, but we've been focusing a lot on visual stuff. Are there any books that you wanted to throw in here as examples of any of these categories?
Oh, obviously you get, especially some short stories in science fiction, whatever, you can get some kind of weird. I don't know if I have anything that's super like disconcerting, because that's a little harder to get, I think. Because you just stop, or it's slower. There's a certain amount of rationality you need to write a story that's going to even make sense.
Yeah.
That you can get away with, you can go more abstract and get some of that irrationality in. I do remember reading The Great Glass Elevator and thinking it was super weird when I was a kid, because like these snakes spelling out things in space, and they were in this glass elevator. I mean, Roald Dahl can get kind of...
Yeah.
And I think there's some Bradbury...
There are some children's authors that can do this, like Lemony Snicket.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I guess in some ways that's more oddball, the very eccentric characters, but he does do a good job of creating this is a really odd atmosphere in the places and the environments that the kids go to. I
remember reading this book by Michael Moorcock recently. Oh yeah, a couple years ago. It's a fantasy. I wish I remember what it was called. Quorum's. I think it's a series of books on for Quorum, but it's the first book. And there was a weird thing, and like it's old fantasy. Like there's this god, and he's like has creatures all over him. He's like this giant thing, and then he keeps changing. And it was weird. And I think there are, in some ways, I think sometimes at the beginning of, I think older fantasy, older science fiction tends to do this sometimes more than what's been a little more popular. There's a way of doing things now.
That's true. And I guess there is, again, that cultural aspect to it. Some of the old fairy tales are weird because, like, you don't really get the context for why they would. You've talked about that before. You don't get the context of why they make some of the choices, why certain things happen in the stories.
Or even, like, I don't know if we call it weird, but I'm sure some people would find it, some of George MacDonald's, like Fantasties or Lilith, there's some unique scenes that I suppose people would find weird if you're not used to fantasy, just because it's a little surreal.
And I imagine, it's surreal. I guess that there's probably, it gives off some of that aspect in maybe some horror or thriller books. Yeah, there's some odd scenes like that in Ted Dekker.
There's scenes in, I don't know if you call it full weird, it'd be very literary weird, there's scenes in The Sound and the Fury by Faulkner that are just so abstract that you're just like, what in the world is going? But I'm not sure. I mean, it's kind of a literary version of it. You don't
Yeah.
feel disquieted. You just feel like
I wouldn't be
am unmoored from.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised though if there are other like scenes in books that delve deep into someone's psychology that kind of give off that bizarre feeling.
I'm sure some people reading some of Dostoevsky might get kind of like that.
I think the best time you captured it was Lady Lilith.
Oh, I'm
Lady
glad.
Lillian. Not
From
not
A
Lilith,
Girl Called
Lillian.
Snort.
Yeah, from A Girl Called
Well,
Snort.
I know you thought, what's it called?
You've written some short stories.
Some of my flash fiction is like the one with the dream ship
yeah.
that comes down, and it's very surreal, magical realism stuff.
I don't remember the details of that one right now, but I do remember telling you about that. I was like, I don't know what you were on. with
Yeah,
that one.
yeah. So I think the more symbolic you get, like Revelation is this to a lot of people.
Oh, true.
Like I was 5th grade, it scared me to death reading Revelation because it's just so surreal, so symbolic that it's
You don't know what to make out of it.
you don't make it, and it's frightening without any connections. And so I think literature can do it, especially the apocalyptic stuff, the more surreal stuff. You don't usually get an entire novel that's that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. Probably short form works better.
Short form are parts of novels.
Scenes.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Well, anyway, we're going long here with Story School, but that's okay because there was a lot to dig, and I don't know. You could probably make an entire episode, maybe. I don't know. I think it'd be interesting to debate with someone the
levels of stuff.
the levels of stuff about whether ugly should really fall in that category or whether that's just differences of an art taste.
Yeah.
I think there's lots of more room for discussion, but something to think about when you're encountering some piece of art that you really don't get. Maybe it's a chance to experience something new. Mm-hmm. With that, let's go into soundtrack. Okay, I knew Nick would want to pick some weird music for soundtrack this time
I never
around.
pick weird music.
Well, so instead of that round, this remix is quirky.
It's
but
weird to you, Tim, but not to me.
fair enough. The remix is quirky, but the game it's from is even quirkier, weirder. This is a remix from Zelda: The Wand of Gameleon, one of the infamous Zelda games for the Philips CDI. Which, if you've never seen if you don't even know what the Philips CDI is, I don't blame you. I didn't either until it became infamous on internet lore. But apparently, it was this CD-based video game console educational thing that had a couple of Zelda games on it with really weird animation.
Yes.
It was not produced by Nintendo. I guess they were like Russian animators who did it. So maybe there's a cultural thing there.
Yeah,
Again,
maybe.
I don't know. But anyway,
Sampo.
yeah. Anyway, so this is a remix from that game. It is called Only Link Can Do the Duck Walk.
Great title.
It is by Lemonectric. Very strange name, I guess, so it's fitting.
Yes.
But hope you enjoy. we're back. Hope you enjoyed that bouncy, fun little song.
Yeah, I can't do the duck walk, so but he can.
Well, yeah, that's only Nick can, or only Link can do it.
Oh, they'll practice then, I guess.
By the way, Nick, can you believe that it has been a year, about a year now, since our epic 100th podcast?
Man, it seems like it was just yesterday. I mean, we were there a long time.
We were there a long time. Somehow we were able to come back. We were there in the realm of derailed thoughts for years and years. And yet
yeah.
we came back the same night we left.
And unfortunately, most people don't. I mean, I've told my wife a lot of the stories, but most people don't even know what went on with us.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories that we haven't really talked about. Listeners, if you haven't heard our 100th episode, you should really check it out.
It's a lot of fun.
It's a lot of fun. I'm super proud of that episode. But it is all about an epic journey we went on through the realm of derailed thoughts.
Looking for the MacGuffin.
Looking for a MacGuffin to so we could get home. But you know what? I think it's time, Nick, that we introduce a new segment where we, because we did make some journals. You remember those journals?
Well, I kept a lot of journals.
Yeah, so we actually have a lot of stories from that really unique time of our lives. So we're going to share with you in this new segment called Journals from the Realm of Derailed Thoughts. Day 471. Boy, what a day. We're still making our way canoeing through the fjords of Mumblejub, looking for our next lead to obtain this mysterious MacGuffin we were told to find. It's been slow going because it's been ridiculously foggy, which makes it hard to tell sometimes if we're going straight or about to run into a cliff. To make it worse, we keep hearing snatches of our own voices, stuttering or stumbling for a word. It was creepy at first, but after the 20th time of hearing my own voice go, well, you know, sure, it's just like, that is interesting. It starts to get a little old. We did manage to find one of the towns nestled within the fjords of Mumblejub and tried to ask around about MacGuffin, but we couldn't understand a thing the residents here were saying. At least some of them were residents, maybe some were travelers like us, but most didn't speak anything resembling human language that I've ever heard of. The few that knew English didn't seem to use it in any way that made much sense. A couple of species I recognized included Ewoks, Pakmara, and those yip aliens. Since the latter at least spoke some English, I tried to ask them a few questions, but they were way too fascinated with the ear flaps on Nick's hat to be of any help. So we gave up and visited the local bar to drown our sorrows in root beer. We found a World War I flying ace there doing the same thing, though it seemed like he was also cursing someone called the Red Baron. Weird kid sure had a big nose and was hard to understand with all his growling. Anyway, for some reason, I tried to lighten the mood by softly singing, "You are my sunshine," but then this weird purple creature with giant eyebrows and a plant growing out of his head came up and screamed, "Hoga wugga," and started blasting me with smoke from his snout. I grabbed the nearest thing to shield myself from the blast, which unfortunately turned out to be a half-finished bowl of soup that I accidentally splashed on a nearby Wookiee. Yeah, as you can imagine, he wasn't happy. I might be dead now if one of the other customers, apparently a walking tree who kept proclaiming his name for some reason, hadn't stepped in to defend us in the ensuing bar fight. The bartender tried to control the chaos, but all I could make out from him was some weird trombone sounds. Anyway, long story short, when the fight started spilling into the streets, Nick and I made a hasty retreat back to our canoe to get out of town. We encountered one other creature on our way out, a short, stocky, white and blue thing with a bowler hat, who said something like, "I'll be a hair-toting toe weevil." I don't think I'm going to miss Mumblejub. So yes,
I remember that. I had a black eye for a long time after.
my ribs are still sore thinking about that one.
Yeah, that's not the worst day we had, but not the best by a long way.
So. No, it was an odd town.
It was an odd town.
But anyway, we're going to move on now into our next segment, our take
on Tales.
All right, so Nick, do you want to go first?
Sure. I've been rereading random books that are like school-worthy because that's a thing I have to do now.
Because you're getting ready for your new teaching job?
Yeah, exactly. So like I read Call of the Wild, which we mentioned some last episode. And then over vacation, I read Billy Budd. We'll talk about that in January. But also Fahrenheit 451, which is Ray Bradbury, which is one of my favorite authors. And I'd read it ages ago, probably middle school. So I didn't remember much of it. And I started reading, I'm like, this is why Bradbury is awesome. No, but if you've not read Fahrenheit 451, what are you doing?
Well, I'm recording a podcast right now, actually.
Well, go read. No, but anyways, if you don't know it at all, it's about this Guy Montag, who's a fireman. And in this book, firemen burn books. That's what they do. They get called in whenever someone finds a book and they burn them. Called Fahrenheit 451 because that's the temperature at which books burn. But it's fascinating because it has a lot to do with Bradbury's love of books, of reading, of the necessity of taking time to not be distracted and to think about real things, have discussions with people. Because like his wife is just living from one distraction to another. She has 3 wall screens, and she wants a 4th one so she can completely surround one. She watches her shows, and she has these seashells she puts in her ears to listen to music while she sleeps. Written in like 1950.
Interesting.
And I mean, there's so many things they talk about. They had this great conversation about the last presidential election, and the entire point was that, well, so-and-so was the most handsome. Why wouldn't people vote for him? I mean, the entire process of voting for president was who basically appeared best on TV in 1950.
That's wild because there's a story. I'm going to interrupt you here real quick.
Go for it.
There's a famous story in, at least I learned about it as a media student back in undergrad, about, I think it was a presidential debate between JFK and Nixon. The people who listened to the debate on the radio thought that Nixon had won the debate because he had the best arguments. Mm-hmm. The people who watched it on TV thought that JFK had won because it was hot in the studio, and so Nixon was sweating a lot. Whereas JFK came off as very cool and collected. He wasn't wiping off sweat as much. So people watching it thought, which is very interesting, just the difference between how the media conveyed different messages depending on what people were paying attention to.
And like he meets this girl who kind of, she'll sit and walk in the dark or taste raindrops as they fall down, or like she's connected to the world, the real world. And he just goes through life without thinking and burning books. And it's interesting because the reason books got banned originally is first people stopped reading them and then they decided to ban them. Anyways, it's pure Bradbury in the way he writes. Bradbury's interesting that my version had like a coda and then like also a note, like 2 different notes from 2 different times from Bradbury. Mm-hmm. He mentioned that he'd probably written more stories about other authors than anyone else. He's written stories about Poe, about Melville, about all kinds of, with other books in it. I mean, he has, in Martian Chronicles, this whole story where they rebuild the house of Usher, from, Fall of the House of Usher. So you can tell his love of books and his love of thinking and having conversations, and it's okay. We should be disagreeing and having these conversations, arguments, and it's a great book it's good classic science fiction if you've ever read it. It's still very applicable to today.
It's interesting not having read it myself, which I know, shame on me.
That's fine. There's a lot of books I haven't read.
But yeah, all in knowing about it has something to do about burning books. I had always assumed that it was something more about, I knew it was science fiction, but I figured the society had let people do that because of not liking what was in the books.
Well, that's a certain extent.
Or kind of an anti-education sort of thing.
I mean, yeah, that's it too, but the people stopped it. Like, everyone's they try to keep them busy with sports and video and anything that doesn't take any thought. So there is a lot of that.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of different threads to it. It's not like one thing.
One answer is this is what's causing this. Okay.
Because they say that, the government wanted to do that, but it had already kind of started from the people already going that way.
Politics being downstream of culture.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yep. And there's a war that's going on. No one even cares because they got their shows.
Oh, man, this is all sounding eerily familiar.
And there's some nuclear war stuff in there because it's that time of,
Yeah.
But it's interesting because one of the firemen also he could quote books a lot. He'd read a number of them. But he burned them, and he thought, because he's like, this book says this book says something else. They just argue each other. It doesn't matter. It's all lies. Let's get rid of them all. So it's still very applicable. And Bradbury just does such a great, he's very poetic in the way he writes things anyways. Mm-hmm. And so if you've not read Bradbury, it's certainly very easy. It's probably one of the easier ways to get into Bradbury. I mean, unless you want a short story, and then any of them will work. But
it seems to be the one, at least for a while, it seemed to be the one that most high schools were reading.
I mean, it's certainly in the vein of Brave New World 1984, but without being quite as bleak.
Okay.
Bradbury just can't ever come off quite as bleak. I think it's just his personality.
Okay.
Because at the end, he finds a group of people, they've each memorized one book. And when the war is over, they'll go and help people, share what was in the books again. And they say, and the books may not help us avoid it again, but it can't hurt having the knowledge that other people have had before. Mm-hmm. So the end's also a little disappointing from a Christian point of view, but there's certainly this sort of like, eventually we'll get there, but we just keep making the same mistakes, which is true, but also not real certain.
Mm-hmm. Now, had you read this before?
Like middle school, I remember very little. Besides, I don't remember liking it as much the first time, probably because I just didn't have the context to.
Sure.
Nowadays, I'm like, yeah, that's still true, and yeah, that's true. Like, speaking of the wife, she's watching her shows all the time, listening to music and talk shows all the time on her ear shells. But early on, she basically overdoses on drugs, on sleeping pills, and she doesn't even remember it. So there's a sense that she really was very depressed, but she didn't even let herself realize it.
Oh.
I mean, you got this opioid thing going on right now. I mean, it's a lot of the same. It rhymes with stuff going on. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's certainly, and it's just a well-written book.
Great. All right. Well, there's your classic book from Nick Hayden.
Yes.
And now for an animated series from little old me.
I'm interested in this because I had been thinking about watching it.
Yeah. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Gravity Falls, which was a darling of the internet and some of the internet community for a few years ago. It was a show that was on Disney Channel. I think originally Disney Channel, then moved to Disney Plus or Disney XD. Mm-hmm. Now it's on Disney Plus, which is how I finally got a chance to see it. And I knew it was very popular. It was one of these shows that had a big cult following because they very purposely had mysteries and like codes hidden in the background and
which
in
sounds
the credits,
cool to me.
Which is pretty fun. So the basic concept of Gravity Falls, if you're not familiar with it, a pair of twins, Dipper and Mabel, boy and girl, they've been sent by their parents to live with their great uncle Stan, so they call him Grunkle Stan, who runs the Mystery Shack, which is kind of a cheap Ripley's Believe It or Not knockoff tourist attraction place in a town called Gravity Falls, somewhere in the forests of Oregon. It's a town where there's a lot of paranormal sorts of activities happen. And I think in the first episode, Dipper finds a journal that helps him kind of guide him through to find some of the weird things. And the big mystery for a lot of the show, initial part of the show at least, is who wrote this journal and what does it all mean and things like that. So it's a fun show. It took a little bit of warming up for me. In terms of art style, it was like right on the border. For like I like the main characters a lot. The main characters' relationships are surprisingly sweet. They get the sibling dynamic really well. I guess the creator of the show was a twin himself, or is a twin himself. But so he knows exactly what growing up like that was like, and I think he based a lot off of his relationship with his twin sister. So that's fun. The mysteries are fun, but honestly, the first season it takes a while. It's one of these shows that like builds on a lot of the things a lot of characters from the town, the townspeople you'll see in subsequent episodes, and they get a little bit more added to them here and there. But in terms of like the ongoing mystery plot, it's very sporadic in the first season, primarily the beginning and the end. The second season goes hardcore into the story. I mean, it still has some like side, you could call them filler, but they're still fun and relevant to character growth kind of episodes. But there's a lot more plot with capital P in the second season. Only 2 seasons because the creator felt like that was the show. You had a very set number of mysteries in it, and that at least ones that they were going to explore. Yeah. And once those are taken care of, it's end of the summer, end of the show, which I respect.
Were the mysteries satisfying?
Yes, I would say so. Now, I had heard a few things about them going in. So, but if you're not, I think that's mostly because having followed Laura on Tumblr, I had heard vague rumors about certain things. But if you haven't heard those, I think you'd still find them surprising. I don't know, though, if I was a parent, though, I'd be a lot more cautious about showing it to my kids. I got the vibe sometimes that I was watching a cartoon that was made for kids who are allowed to watch horror movies too young.
Oh, okay.
Just every now and then, like, I remember there was one scene at a mansion where, like, there was a room with lots of taxidermy, and all of a sudden, like, the animals were all like having blood coming out of their eyes.
Yeah,
things like
that's
that.
fun stuff.
Yeah, certain kids would, and I guess I was a little confused. Like, I didn't know for sure what age the twins were supposed to be. It turns out I think they're like 12.
Okay.
Which that makes it a little bit more understandable. It's like, okay, yeah, 12-year-old, yeah, sure. And again, depending on the family. See, my family was never like into Goosebumps.
Yeah.
Reading that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Our family just didn't do that kind of thing. I imagine families who did, teens and preteens and whatnot, that this would be up their alley.
Yeah.
The other parent thing I would be cautious of, there's one of the employees of the Mystery Shack. Her name is Wendy, and she's one of these like cool rebellious teens. I mean, she's a fun character. She hangs out with the kids, and she's nice and sweet and that kind of stuff. But she also like is the kind that would like think graffiti in the school bus is cool.
Yeah.
And tries to shuffle off work as much as she can. So if I was very like, I don't really want my kids to emulate that,
Yeah.
I would have some second thoughts about that sort of character too. Well, and the Grunkle himself, I mean, the whole Mystery Shack is kind of a scam, sleazeball sort of thing, but they play that up for laughs.
Yeah.
So I could see some people like, he's teaching his kids how to do counterfeiting. I'm not sure that it's a little questionable, but again, they make fun. Like, there's a great line where they're like going, the twins are going to go investigate some mystery in town. I think a possible murder plot. And he's like, that sounds like something a parent would be very much against. Good thing I'm an uncle. And as an uncle, I can appreciate that.
Yes.
So, but overall, it's a fun show. If you want to go in for the mysteries, it may take a little while to get to the meat of it. And like I said, art style, some of the townsfolk were just crazy enough. I was like, this is really kind of on the border of like the kind of art style I appreciate. I might not have gone on with it if I wasn't watching it with someone. But if you stick through it enough, I think you'll find some really cool moments in there.
Nice.
So anyway, I think that's all we got for our take on Tales today. Now, if you may be wondering about our standard summer movie roundup.
We've watched lots of summer movies. Well, no.
Yes. Yeah. And unfortunately, we really miss going to the movie theater. So instead of our normal summer, since there haven't been any new movies to go out and see, next time, hopefully we get in that in August, so it still counts as a summer movie review. We'll do a previously on talk about movie theater experiences that we really enjoyed. So that's something that you can look forward to. Other than that, I think that's all we got for today.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure I want to leave. There's this guy in the corner. Well, not guy, like
a robot.
Maybe. I'm not really sure.
He kind of reminds me of like a Victorian R2D2 or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm going to try to wind him up after we get done with this. See what happens.
Sure. I'll take anything we can get in this place. Yeah, exactly. This place is crazy. I heard like that there's a castle over there, and I feel like I heard lots of women screaming for some reason.
Huh.
Yeah. I'm not sure this place is as safe as it used to be.
No, I don't. I get that feeling too. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap up here with some contact info. Nick, what is our email address?
It is derailedtrains@gmail.com. Feel free to leave us questions or suggestions. Or there you can send us either a written or a video or an audio response to, like, give us a story of a weird movie that you remember seeing that just never left you.
Yeah.
We'd love to just hear your childhood scarring story.
Whether it's something that you wound up visiting later and really appreciating, or like you've been too scared to even like approach again.
Yeah, so
we'd love to hear it. Share us your trauma.
Yeah, we love trauma.
That sounds terrible.
It is terrible.
But you can either email us or leave us a comment at derailedtrainsofthought.blogspot.com. And of course, we are available on iTunes, or as it's called now, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and Spotify. Oh, and you can leave us a review at any of those places.
Yes, we always enjoy reviews.
I assume Spotify does reviews or ratings or something like that.
Sure.
Any of those things would help.
And just tell your friends if you like an episode, share it.
And hopefully we won't traumatize them.
Nope, not much.
All right, Nick, what's your soundtrack for today?
I'm pretty sure the default was go pick a Maze Dude, but they're not weird.
It depends on which one you're talking about.
See, I'm so used to them now. Like they're a great song. I mean, like literally, I'm like, well, is this weird still? I could after all the other ones I picked.
Is it just oddball now?
It's just oddball now, you know.
Okay, so but you wanted to go into the realm of bizarre.
Or something like, all right, I want to try something different. So they had a Final Fantasy II album called Rebellion, and there was a song in there called The Final One, WON, remixed by Sir Jordanius, and it's a little different. The beginning is especially bizarre, and then it gets a little more, well, a little less bizarre, I guess. But anyways, it's probably up my alley and maybe not yours.
It was certainly unique.
Yes, unique. See, if you had already picked the rules of the road, I could have just done that one.
Yeah, well, I couldn't sit on that one long.
And I had some 6-minute ones like that.
Now,
But anyways,
is this Final Fantasy 2 or is this specifically from like the re-release of Final Fantasy 2?
I'm actually confused because the remix album is just Final Fantasy 2. It's from.
Yeah. But on the OC Remix website, they listed it as part of Final Fantasy 1 and 2 Dawn of Souls, which I assume is some sort of,
That's
a
DS,
2004 DS re-release.
So I don't honestly know.
Okay. I was just curious. I guess even if it's from the remake, it's probably
not
Final
original
Fantasy
music,
2. Yeah. So, okay. Well, thanks for listening, folks. I hope we didn't weird you out too much. And, well, I guess we haven't done Nick's song yet. So
Not yet.
The cat's still in the bag. Anyway, thanks for listening. Until next time, this is Tim.
This is Nick.
Bye-bye.
Adios.
Picture yourself on a plane soaring through deep blue sky. Suddenly, you go insane from turmoil and grief and despair turns your hair into beautifully colored gray. And then you die! And then we all die! So let's begin. We're going in. So let's begin.
going in. So let's begin to face the end.
Congratulations.
You won.